Forests are not solely phenomena of land made from trees. One can find forests of plankton in the sea. And the truth is, if you look in any pond or river, or even a long-standing puddle, among the tall, flowing strands of algae, there is another forest. A forest of waving hairs like wisps, and even plant-like organisms like spheres that magically float about. And just like any forest, the forests of algae are ecosystems filled with life. For hidden here, among these algal strands and their spores, are countless myriad creatures, and evidence of the first diminutive formation of multicellular life. These algae are in and of themselves amazing life forms, capable of producing asexually or sexually, and, like all plants, capable of making their own energy from the nutrients flowing about them. And of course, like all plants, they give the world its oxygen. Here, you see 3 oxygen bubbles. At the top, a small one at the center, and a medium one lower. And you can literally see the oxygen bubbles grow as the footage progresses. It's most obvious in the small central bubble. In fact, it was somewhat difficult to shoot this episode of Microstory because I shot the entire thing among algal forests, and the live algae, placed under a slide and coverlet, quickly produced so much oxygen that I had to rehydrate the slides repeatedly because the oxygen drove out the water. This particular forest of algae was drawn from the bottom of a clear and clean river deep in an Acadian woodland. And just like the forest to be found on land, or the plankton forest found in seas, this forest is full of a wide variety of life. You can see a species of that life above, and 2 more here. These mobile, bright green organisms are strange hybrid creatures called Paramecium bursaria, eukaryotes, that is to say true cells with nuclei, which are part animal and part plant. That green within them is symbiotic zoochlorella algae. You can see here they are filled with algae, hundreds of individual algal cells, which form a symbiotic relationship with them and allow them to create energy from the nutrients floating about them in the water medium. Indeed, their abundance of energy is evidenced by how mobile they are and how active. I've applied just a bit of pressure to the coverlet to pin this paramecium in place, and changing the light to false color allows us to get a better view of the thousands of ciliae which surround the cell body. It uses the ciliae to move itself about in the water, quite actively. Paramecium bursaria is also the only paramecium that forms symbiotic relationships with algae. And now, switching to a false polarized light, we can really focus on the symbiotic algae within. Paramecium bursaria is not the only organism that has learned to form symbiotic relationships with algae, but it is certainly a striking example. Look at it. It is packed so full of algal cells that one might argue it is more algae than paramecium. Here we have other forms of algae within our algal forest, little cells within protective membranes they have manufactured. Living together in a colonial fashion, such organisms portray the first lumbering steps of single-celled life toward multicellularity. And at the very center of the screen, that small spherical collection that is yet another colony of algal cells. That is Euterina, a form of colonial algae, and a bit further on its way toward multicellularity. Switching to false color helps us to perceive better the outline of the algal cells and the mucilaginous membrane that surrounds them. There are also a wide variety of microscopic multicellular animals within this forest of river algae. This busy fellow is a rotifer. Rotifers, like all microscopic animals, have diminutive cells, but they are multicellular. They have nervous systems, gastrointestinal tracts, even brains, and eyes, though the eyes may be somewhat rudimentary. It is actively grazing. It looks to be on the small individual cells of algae. And right here, we might see only the forest of algae. But if we turn the focus knob a little and bring our focus plane down to the very depths, far below the coverlet, in this case depths meaning less than a fraction of a millimeter, we bring into focus a small freshwater nematode, also grazing among the algae. And just like the diminutive crustacean we saw a moment ago, This one too appears to be feeding on the single-celled algae floating between the larger strands of algae. Though I admit I could be wrong. It could be feeding on bacteria floating about and unseen at this level of focus and magnification. We'll go in a little closer and see if we can get a better look at them, though it's tricky. The algae itself is large on the microscopic scale, and this leaves some depth of water beneath the coverlet, only a fraction of a millimeter. But at the microscopic scale, that's a lot. And as the nematode moves about, he is easily able to burrow deeper and get out of the plane of focus. Nearby, we have a more cooperative and fascinating microscopic animal, one we took a look at in a previous episode. This is the gastrotrick, also known as the hairy belly. Interesting multicellular microscopic animals found both in saltwater and freshwater. And this forest is rich in life. Right beside him, there are two more of the Paramecium bursaria, though the gastrotrick and the Paramecium don't seem to have any interest in each other. Whatever their food of preference is, it's not each other. The bright green of the chlorophyll of the Paramecium, in contrast to the gastrotrick and even the algae that's all around, is incredible, as if more green than green. But in the micro story, life is fragile. Up in a corner of the slide, a bit away from the algae, I found this lone Daphnia, a microscopic crustacean that is a giant among microbes. Like us, it is a multicellular animal with a nervous system, a little brain, a gastrointestinal system, and a little heart. You can see it beating beneath its shell, all the way at the left edge of the crescent of its body. But this little crustacean is soon to pass away. They only lived days in their natural environment, and perhaps it was old, or perhaps being placed on the slide was overly traumatic for it. Watch its heart, a final little shudder, and then its internals seem to collapse at the very moment its heart stops beating. There. I could not help but feel a pang of sympathy for the little creature, for though it is only a microbe, and quite literally tens of billions are born and die every single day, we are in a sense kin, both multicellular creatures, both blessed with nervous systems and wants and needs. We share that sacred path called life. And I found myself wishing I could have done something for the little creature. But perhaps it is enough that I and we were there to witness its final moment, allowing it, in a small way, to live on. Thank you for coming along on this voyage of discovery into the microstory. The Microstory program is part of the Understory Network, a series of programs promoting education on the science of the natural world. Under our Microstory playlist, you can find all the programs related to all things microscopic. In the Understory playlist, we study animals, plants, and fungi, and issues of conservation. And in the Sky Story playlist, we explore astronomy and the world of astrophotography. Our programs are made possible by our many viewers, patrons, and students. And we owe all of you a profound thanks. And if you like what you see here, please take a moment to like and subscribe.